Halito, chuma chukma. What's happening with you, beloveds? What's going on out there in Indian country? Got a little part 2 for you of the spicy meatball that we presented the other day. Welcome to No Grandma Killers TV. If you haven't subscribed already, I know you see it. You better come on over. Like, subscribe, hit the like button. So we have Copper Indio today. What's up, Copper? How are you?
Hey, Grand Rising. This is the Phoenix Moon. I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I guess it's been a long morning, but and a late night. but I'm doing well. Hopefully, you're doing well as well, and everybody that can hear the program.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you so much for asking. I'm excited to have you here. I definitely appreciate you coming through. Um, uh, I think you're a very interesting brother. I like your point of view. I totally get it. Um, uh, Thank you for gracing No Grandma Killers with your presence. I do appreciate that. So we're going to be talking about House Resolution 6666. We were speaking of it the other day, just basically when they introduced the bill, the beginning of May, so people can kind of follow up and see what it is. And I wanted to make sure, it was important to make sure that we present that specifically regarding all of the hoopla and miscommunication, misinformation, and things being propagated and put out there in regards to the pandemic, the spread of COVID, the links to the people's death and the 5G, and all of these things that everybody is quite familiar with. So now here it is. This is a law that a bill that's being introduced to essentially be enacted into law. And the same people from this gallery of ne'er-do-wells and people who accept defeat quite easily when it comes to oppression. And they're not really at the point of revolution because they will not change a thing, right? Certainly not the angry approaches or the defeat, the woe is me, the nothing's ever going to change kind of thing. But what we're going to do is make sure that people are aware you have a way to say that you agree with this or that you disagree with it. But now we want to kind of spotlight what's important, what it is that you say is important, and give you a solution to present a solution, right? Because your solution and mine may not be the same thing. But if you know what it is that you're looking for, and if these are the things that are your particular grievances, there's something on the table that is going to challenge the particular grievances that you have. So now what is it that you are going to do with what is on the table? Are you just going to let them keep piling it on your plate until it overwhelms you and you say, I knew it, I didn't want spaghetti in the first place, and now look, we got spaghetti, they're going to make us eat it, right? When you actually had the opportunity to be able to stop it and say, wait a minute, I just want the meat sauce. I'm going to have a sloppy Joe. I don't want the noodles, right? So you want to make sure that people have the opportunity to start learning how to get some sort of resolution to the things that they say that they're upset about as a people.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for allowing me on the platform and allowing me to have an audience to talk about some of this. I know it's been discussed among African Americans and Africans before, and as things have kind of progressed, I work in media, so I'm kind of used to the idea of like the evolving story and the constant breaking news. And so as new things come up and as the news changes, I like to make sure that people, if possible, are made aware of what's going on and how the situation affects them. So again, thank you. And if I could, I would like to share my screen so we can get started with this. And to your point, let's see here. Let's see. I'm trying to get set up here to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. There we go. I'm sorry about that. Can you guys see my screen now? Are you able to see the webpage I have up?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. That's the World Health Organization. There was a video clip. I'm not going to play any of this because I don't want the video to be flagged. But this was during a White House press conference um, that I caught one afternoon, where this is Dr. Burks here, and she's on the COVID-19 task force, and uh, she mentioned the term that they were going to start using called sentinel surveillance. And in it, she mentioned that they were going to start enacting sentinel surveillance in nursing homes, in what she described as urban clinics. And I think you all know what the term urban is used to refer to, as well as indigenous populations. And so my ears kind of itched when I heard her say indigenous populations, because she's referring to many of the Native American tribes, but she's also referring to us, which is why she used the term indigenous. So she's talking about all of us that are considered to be the American Indian and the Native American alike in one fell swoop. They're talking about people on reservations. They're talking about people that are considered to be an Indian in whatever sense you can think of, that would be defined as such. So anybody that would have put Indian or anything like that, American Indian, on the census, so to speak, would be impacted by this. That includes us. That includes us, even if we're not referring to ourselves as that. The government knows who we are. And if anyone has any doubt about that, there's plenty of proof to show that Trump, especially, but people in the government long before Trump got into office, know who we are. And so when they use terminology like that, that's attached to us, because this came a day or two after they started saying that African Americans, so to speak, were more affected by the coronavirus and dying in larger numbers than any other group, when previously they hadn't said anything about African Americans. They even had a study soon after this came out of China that this was going to not affect the so-called African American as much as it would Asian Americans or people who were genetically considered to be Asian. So this isn't about face on the side of the government in terms of their narrative about how they're handling this. And this is important because of this bill, and like you referred to as the HR 6666, the COVID-19 testing, reaching, and contacting everyone, or the Trace Act. Now you went through this before, so I won't spend a whole lot of time with this, but there's a couple things I want to make sure we look at so that the audience understands what's going on here with this. The 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 title of this is to authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing for COVID-19 and related activities such as contact tracing through mobile health units and as necessary at individuals' residences and for other purposes. Now, this is very open language, and anyone who's read uh, legal documents in terms of laws being passed and this kind of language that's used in these kinds of documents know that allows a lot of wiggle room. And the reason why it allows so much wiggle room is because the next phase of this is what the government has wanted out of us, not just the United States government. I'm talking about other entities like the World Health Organization have wanted out of us for a long time, and that's to track our movement and trace our interactions with others. Hence why it's referring to contact tracing. It's the same thing Dr. Birx was talking about when she meant sentinel surveillance. This was done in the 90s as well, and this is done, well, really since the 90s, as they tracked several diseases like Ebola, like SARS, swine flu, things like that. This is no different, but this is going to be what they're going to try to do on a much larger scale. See, when H1N1 and the swine flu uh, became an epidemic, they were more contained than this, but the sentinel surveillance was also more contained. We didn't lock down the whole country and the whole world because the swine flu got out, or H1N1 or SARS or whatever have you. Ebola is as contagious as Ebola is, there still wasn't a worldwide lockdown like we're seeing now. So this is going to be done at a much wider level. This is actually going on in other countries as well. And so I don't run my mouth too much at one time, because I know there's a lot of information. But the World Health Organization talks about sentinel surveillance here, and this is a little bit more of what Dr. Burks was talking about. And this is something that, because it's the World Health Organization, this is something that is happening not only here, that they're suggesting here, but they're also talking about in places like Ireland and other parts of the EU and in Asia and South America. So this is going to be something that's going to be attempted globally, but we want to focus on where it's affecting us and how it's affecting us. So it says here, under the World Health Organization, under sentinel surveillance, a sentinel surveillance system is used when high quality data are needed about a particular disease that cannot be obtained through a passive system. Selected reporting units with a high probability of seeing cases of the disease in question, good laboratory facilities, and experienced, well-qualified staff identify and notify on certain diseases. Whereas most passive surveillance systems receive data from as many health workers or health facilities as possible, a sentinel system deliberately involves only a limited network, of carefully selected reporting sites. For example, a network of large hospitals might be used to collect high quality data on various diseases and their causative organism, such as invasive bacterial disease caused by Haemophilus influenza type B. So meningococcus and pneumococcus. So like essentially pneumonia and influenza. Influenza caused pneumonia. Now, this is not only them. This is the data collection part. The other part is what I wanted to show everybody from this video here. And this is a video, again, I'm not going to show this because I don't want it to get flagged or anything, but this is a press conference where it was stated that, and this is in Ventura County in California. This is a program where they said they were going to start testing, where they were going to try to have individuals who were suspected, not documented, but suspected of having COVID-19 to be traced back to their home, to be visited at home, and if individuals within their household were found to be infected, they would be removed. Even if let's say if you weren't infected, but your child had been because he got out and came into contact with somebody, that child would be removed and moved to some other housing to be quarantined. And then you're talking at that point 2 weeks to a month. So I wanted to underscore how important what they're talking about doing is, because this bill, this House resolution bill, again, it hasn't been debated yet. So a lot of text hasn't been added to this yet. But should this bill get through Congress and get to the president's desk and get signed, this is what's going to be law. And it's important because they're talking about doing this, and this goes beyond just our community, just beyond the American Indians. This is a national thing. They're talking about taking people that are classified as being white, Asian, everything else. This is all of us. And why this is important to our community is that we have a power. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. I've looked at all the resources I needed to for the moment, but we have a power in politics that our community doesn't understand, but people in politics do understand. When they went and gave us Barack Obama, we were given that candidate for president, and by their measurements, 90-something% of our community showed up to vote for him to be president. That wouldn't have happened if our people didn't show up, which also shows that there are many more of us, and you guys already know this, many more of us than are reported or cited in statistics. But because of that, we have a power when it comes to representation in our government that we have largely unused for our own purposes. We've used them for other people's purposes, but not our own. And situations like this is where we need to actually use that power. This is where our enfranchisement and our rights as citizens needs to be used for our benefit and to protect our rights. And this is where we have to cite, as Sister Phoenix Moon has shown in the previous discussion about this, the list of representatives that have co-signed this already, because they think it's a good idea, and some group that's probably funding them, some group of lobbyists or whatever have you, the World Health Organization or whoever else, has told them that this is a good idea, so they put it up for a vote. If you don't think this is a good idea, then it's time to let these representatives know that, and know that if they don't work in your interest, that they will be removed, because you will be removing them. You have to take this power, and if you do not take it and use it, it's going to be used against you, because there are lobbyists that are pushing for this. There are entities and other groups, other nonprofits and so forth, that are using this and using these politicians to get this done. So I'm sorry for the rant, so to speak, but this is a large part of what I wanted to make sure that the community was aware of.
I definitely appreciate it. That was exactly what I knew you had, and I was hoping that you came with exactly that. Sometimes it's better to hear it from a different point of view, to kind of help you iron out the kinks, so articulately and eloquently as you put it, and again expressing the the importance of our people, not just limited to American Indians. I think that's something that needs to be reiterated, the fact that this is something that everybody is going to have a serious situation with. Think of any type of mass quarantining issues, what that would do for foster care. Just the amount of vulnerability that that it makes people, and for it to just slide across the president's desk as them being the ones that's saying it's okay. It's kind of the same as the people saying it's okay, and the people don't say it's okay. I think they need to make the distinction and be able to identify who in fact the people are, in whichever aspect it is, especially when it comes to something so serious as much as this health situation. And that goes contrary to whatever anyone's opinion is. There still has to be some sort of breadcrumbs. We know what the facts are. The facts are there's some crazy stuff going on, and our people of color, period, are directly affected, right? The common citizen outside of the every community is essentially vulnerable here at this time. And this is the part where we have to take some sort of activities. We don't know any lobbyists. How many people have been going to these town hall meetings and rubbing any elbows wherever it is that they go, right? So you're supposed to be taking on some of these assignments. When you enter into these areas, it would always behoove you to get a little familiar who's who. Maybe look up who the sheriff is. I mean, you got to have some sort of direction of hierarchy in order to meet your needs, right? In order to protect your rights as a citizen, you have to make them enforce what it is that infringes upon your right, even if it's them that is infringing. So with that being said, we have the power to have a bill introduced as well, right? And these are some of the things that we'd like to be working on. And a lot of this stuff is unfamiliar to us, but we do know that these are the things that are going to be required, that are going to be what it takes. This is going to be the stuff of what the righteous things that the people that are oppressed say that they want are made of. And there's a certain way that we have to conduct ourselves. And that's not everybody's shtick, clearly, or they'd be doing it. And if it was important to, when it's important to people, they will make a way for it to be able to be conveyed to others that are in a position or capable of being able to construct something completely new, where not just, as particularly for the American Indian. And I have to say that not to separate ourselves from any, impending problems that this may cause. But I say that in a sense of Why do we still have to finish last, even when this might be the end of everything that we know? I don't think I can take that kind of L. I'm not looking for that kind of L for the ancestors. That's almost like compromising the integrity of what it is that we say that we want. So if everything else goes to shit, whatever else is left, it belongs to our children to have a place where there's the conversations that they had to have with us, we had to have with these generations. Those new generations won't have to have those conversations. They'll be eliminated from them. Hopefully, by that time, they won't know what oppression is like. We have to make them comfortable. So it's going to be reversing things that are already in their DNA. What's in their DNA? A lot of these dudes are scared of their oppressors, right? It's a common thing. It's a common thing, right? Henceforth, the common opinion of how people say they feel, and they display it in any venue that they are allowed to display it. But I want to say, again, back to the being proactive versus reactive. That's something that people are going to have to condition themselves to want, desire, and determine themselves to focus on.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned this before on a previous live stream, but you said something to the effect of, we don't have friends and we should operate as if we don't have friends. Um, there may be people from time to time who may have common interests with us, and be we should understand that, and we should be open to that. However, we should not get so comfortable as to depend on these people, because at some point their interests will be different than ours. So as you said, we should operate as if we do not have friends. We should operate in our interests at all times. And I will say this as well. And this I would, if anybody wants to question this or to verify what I'm about to say, they can, because there's no shortage of proof on this. But I've said this, and I've said this on A2's streams before. Anything that has ever happened, that is happening now, or will happen, will begin with the American Indian. Period. Now, and I say that that's a very broad statement, but I say that to say that whenever change is needed, our cosign, our community's cosign is needed. They don't refer to us as Indians when they ask for it, but they look for our cosign. They look for us to be on board with it, which is why a lot of times we get duped into things that we wouldn't normally accept. And so we need to make sure that we are vigilant in not being duped into things that we wouldn't normally accept. This is where, as you said, being proactive is necessary. This is where we have to use our enfranchisement. I'll also cite the Ku Klux Klan. This group and a lot of other brotherhoods were created during the Reconstruction period, and these people gave us a very hard time. They gave our grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents a very hard time, and moved them in some cases off of their land. Intimidated them and scared them and threatened them out of their land and into the cities. This is how we ended up in places so far away from where our families are from. Why did they do that though? They did that to get us off of our land so they could take it, because they knew that they didn't have a right to it, and if they got us to give it up, they could take it and claim it as their own. But also to break our will to be enfranchised, to break our will to have a say in what happens to us as citizens politically, to break our will to have any influence over our laws. And I'm telling you right now that, and I'm speaking to the broader community, I'm telling you right now, with bills like this being put up, the government is taking its opportunity while all of us are at home and many of us are distracted with TV and streaming and games and so forth. They're taking this opportunity while nobody's looking to pass through all of these goodies that they've been trying to get through. Because notice in the last 4 years, everything's been about Trump. Everything's been about getting Trump impeached. Everything's been about, Russia and this and that and the other. And I've been saying this for the last 4 years, that much of this is a distraction. And when the time comes that these people would try to get 4 years worth of stuff done overnight, and this is what you've been seeing between this and the CARES Act. So this is where we come in, because nobody's going to look out for us. Nobody's going to come in and say, well, the misclassified American Indian, aka African American, aka Negro, needs stuff. You have a few folks in on the left that may say they work in our interests, but do they? Do they really? I mean, I'm not saying they don't, but we should question these things. We really need to have a conversation about, are these other political groups working in our interest? Because we always seem to get the short end of the stick. We always seem to get left out when there's stuff to be gained from this. And we definitely don't have anything to gain from this bill or anything like it. So this is where we come in, and we have to stop this. And we have to let these elected officials be reminded that if they don't work in our interest, if they don't represent us, that is their one job in Congress. If they don't represent us, they will be removed. But I'll yield the mic.
I do apologize. I had to go get a drink of water.
Oh, no worry. I'm sorry.
To reacting to different allergies and stuff like that in this environment. You got to get used to it. Definitely, people are going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to find their area of study and get to it.
You know what? Another thing I wanted to mention as well, Sister Phoenix Moon, if I could, is what's happening, not just with the idea that they're coming to look after everybody and track and trace people, but we were talking before, when I was on a previous live stream here, about the land and about how agriculture is our culture. This is what we were doing when people from other lands came here. We were growing our own food. And when you look in more recent times, like during the Great Depression, the thing that got us through trying periods like that was the fact that we grew our own food.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
And so, how we're so far removed from being able to, be sole contributors to our well-being is a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game we play, being neglectful.
It really is. And right now, because we've been trained, we've been taught and trained over generations to depend on the grocery store, to depend on the gas station, the convenience store, to depend on the fast food restaurant. We've been trained over decades to be dependent on these things. Well, what happens when, because right now, right as we speak, manufacturers and distributors of, let's say, meat packing, Smithfield, Gwaltney, and so forth. That's the shortest part of the food supply chain, because most of this meat can't be frozen before it hits the market. So after let's say cattle are slaughtered and all that product is processed, it gets on the truck and it goes to the grocery store where then it's all put out for people to buy and to take home. Well, those meat packing companies, all of them in some degree, are being shut down because people are coming down with COVID-19 in those areas, especially in the Midwest. Midwest is especially hard hit in terms of meat packing. And so if the employees aren't there to process any of this stuff, a lot of these animals are getting slaughtered. And so if you've got this massive waste of not only life, but also of a food source, look how dependent people are on meat these days, and even just in our community alone. So when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the local market, and there's no chicken, there's no beef, there's no pork, there's no whatever you eat, then what? So we have to account for how we get our food, because, and if you go back and look in history, I'm sure, as you've talked about in live streams before, when you look at our history, how are we beaten? And I'm using air quotes. I'm sorry you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes. How did they beat us? They didn't do it through open warfare. They starved us to death.
That's right.
That
That's
was
it.
one of the tools that they used, correct? So with that said, we have to make sure that we are able to eat, that we're able to feed our families. Because even if we can't move anywhere, as long as we can eat, we can stay still. If the law mandates that we stay still. But if you're stuck in home and you can't eat, now what? You want to talk about disobedience? It won't be very civil
It won't
at
be
that point.
anything civil about that kind of disobedience. Is that what you call it? It's survival of
Right.
the fittest. That point.
Right. So we need to, and as far as solutions, I think the biggest thing that I'm prescribing is that we use civics as we have it before we don't have that as an option.
If and at the time where now we've had this time to be able to do better as far as civics are concerned, readily available, easily accessible, um, being able to get a head start. I mean, I think it's strange. It's like so many people that have all of these different uh, esteemed qualifications, and at the same time it's like they still kind of missed it, like all of these political science majors, and like what are they in these positions for? They're in these positions to help themselves, or whatever it is, whatever causes it is that they want to contribute to. And what happens is, I think that we as a people, we tend to personalize those things and think that all the skin folk are just supposed to, be readily available for us and all of our whims. And being that the average person doesn't really understand any kind of polity or civics, they tend to forget what their obligations are in order to bring forth the things that it is that they say they want, or that they don't want, for that matter. They don't say anything. And that is really kind of the main thing. And when they do say something, it's too late. And they don't go back retroactively and have some things changed. Like anybody, I'm still looking for the Freedmen's Laws of 1875. They've been repealed. I think they're in either Title 5, maybe for nationality, or Title 8 of the U.S. Code. But anyway, and you can look and see that it was repealed quite some time ago, but you can't even go to the GPO office and see what it is. So I'm interested in finding that. And if any of you kick-ass researchers, if you are able to come across it, please share it with me. I'd love to see it. I've been looking for it for quite some time. But anyway, definitely there's some things that have to be repealed. There's some things that have to be introduced. There's some bills of our own that we need to have, passed and enacted into law. This is a good time to do it. It's
It's a,
definitely a
it's,
good time to do it. While it just so happens that the same people that Donald Trump has a problem with has been not wholly, but partially and responsible for some of the detriment of the American Indian people. Outside of the things that we haven't done for ourselves, you still need to be able to name who your accusers are. And everybody has been in cahoots, and we need to be able to solidly connect how these people have contributed to the trauma, the genocide, the apartheid, the things that we are saying that we are upset about. It has to be meticulously documented from start to finish. And that goes for you, yourself, how it affects your children, generations past, prior, right? And present and future. You got to have it all in one spiel. It's got to be one fantastic soliloquy of your best monologue ever. I'm talking, ta-da,
yeah. It we have to.
Mhm.
Because if we don't do it, who's gonna come in and do it for us?
No one.
Right?
No one.
Exactly.
And then you have the people that will give you these so-called solutions, but yet selling you. I mean, how can a man with a limp sell you a cane to straighten out your walk? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that just doesn't even make any sense. And he's still limping. Like, I don't understand. He's got something to make you walk straight, but not himself. Uh, I
Right.
digress.
And people have to understand as well, because we see a lot of people not only get a lot of wealth and amass a lot of resources while everybody else is losing everything, but we also see them having greater influence over how things play out after the disaster is done, after all the dust settles. Well, that shows you that it is possible to not only live and survive through things like this, but to thrive and to actually be out in a better place on the other side of it. There's a way we can do that. We just have to be aware of it and put it to action. This is where your voice needs to be heard. And our community spends a lot of time complaining about why things aren't the way we think they should be, or who put us in this mess, or how we got here. This is where you stop that cycle of people doing horrible things to you, and you go back to the same people who are supposed to represent you in Congress, who are supposed to be your voice that goes to the president so that he can carry out the law. This is where you get to those people and you remind them, if you do not represent us and represent our interests, will be removed. And you don't have to spend a lot of money to do that, not necessarily. The most basic thing you can do, even if you don't have a nonprofits tend to have a little more influence over these kinds of things. So if in the conversation we've had about that, there is a way to establish a nonprofit and get the funds collected and get the funds used to influence these people. But even beyond that, at the end of the day, it's going to be our votes that decide if all of these politicians, all of these representatives that co-sign laws like this, that endorse these things, our votes are going to be what decides whether they still have a seat in Congress or not, or whether that goes to someone. And honestly, not only should this encourage us to go and get these action committees started in terms of nonprofits, but also to make sure that we are consistently holding these people accountable by voting, but also that we take the most eligible among us in our communities
Mm.
and start promoting them to get into this system. Because you're not going to defeat this system by going outside of it and running from it. You have to go in. How did these people come here and quote, and I'm using air quotes again, conquer this land? They came in, they infiltrated, they weaved themselves in with us, and they started to take control that way. We have to do the same thing. We have to put our people in those seats in Congress,
We do.
because we know those people are working in our interests. And if they begin to dither, if they begin to look at other people's interests over ours, we remind them why they're there.
And then this way, we are certain that our points are getting across. Because even the people that are sitting there, for instance, with the Black Caucus, they have not, um, uh, they have not voiced their grievances. Like, people can openly see a complete set of people that are in pain, grief, dealing with trauma, and all sorts of things. And nobody, Maxine Waters has not addressed any of those things. How come we all get to hear that, but no one calls Maxine Waters, right? No one's
Precisely.
calling Nancy Pelosi. No one's contacting their representatives. No one's doing that. It becomes our problem, and then you know, as if like somebody is supposed to. They're waiting for someone to show them how they want to be comfortable. Like, can anybody like really? They can help you adjust your pillow, but it goes a long way for them to just get it just right. Someone else to do it for you. I mean, you, if you're physically mobile, you're able to adjust it to your comfort level. But if I need you to do it for me because I'm immobile, then I gotta just settle for, yeah, yeah, is that it? Oh yeah, yeah, that's great. Even though I really want it this way a little more, you know. But at
Right.
the end of the day, we kind of got to stop, encourage people to not be so complacent with getting your behind whipped all the time. There's some act right. Use it. It's available. Use it before you lose it. Because the way that it's going now, they're going to try to find ways to take it away now that we know how to apply the pressure. What
I'm
are you going to
telling
do with
you,
that?
it's
Who's
like
going
that.
to be responsible for hindering the way to get ahead of the curve in that aspect? Hey Bones, how are you? Shout out to you. What's happening, Grand Rising?
Grand Rising, bro.
Oh, greetings, Sister Phoenix. Greeting, Copper Indio. No, I mean, y'all was making some great points, and just wanted to add, just real quick, is that a lot of times the problem is we don't know the proper branches to take our complaints to. Like sometimes we'll go to Congress when there's a part of when we're supposed to be going to the executive branch. I mean, we started doing civics just to show that a lot of the branches that we should be taking our complaints to is under the executive branch. Like USDA falls under the executive branch. FSA falls under the executive branch. Housing falls under the executive branch. So now when you have these complaints, you know who to take it to so it can get addressed. Going to your congressman arguing about housing, they can't help you. They no nothing they do affects housing. Nothing they do affects the funding. When it comes to the funding and that's executive branch. When it comes to laws and acts, then that's Congress. You know, we just have to start knowing who to go to and stop yelling at everybody to get the situation fixed. Really, you know, we have to be willing to relearn what we don't know.
That's right. And that requires us to do what? It's basically like we have to go right back to college and associates and bachelors in grad school and masters, right? All over again. In a different aspect that's not a controlled environment where now this is where your free thinking and your ability to step outside of yourself to see what it is that you want, so you can like KRS One said, put yourself in the picture, right? See how the green screen got the living room. Place yourself in the picture. This looks like some place that I could relax in without hearing a whole bunch of I hate Phoenix, See this living room here in the background. That's the visuals. It looks like a comfortable environment that's a place that I'd like to chill, right? So you put yourself in the picture politically, in America, how you want to see your posterity, right? So if everybody still has the woe is me, they can't do anything. Now that people are going to not have any excuses, because we are going to show a lot of things. We're looking forward to expressing and conveying and showing people a lot of things that we missed that are a direct contribution to our oppression. And it's going to be some things that are exclusively to American Indians, and some things that are a global thing, for anyone in the world. No one should be oppressed anywhere. I am anti-oppression anywhere for anyone. There's no respect of persons that tend to be oppressors. They all the same. They all can get it. I feel the same. It's the same sentiment.
Correct. And American Indian Council said something in the chat to where Indians are to regulate commerce with Congress. And a lot of people use the statement, but I think they miss what that means. In order to regulate commerce, when you have to be producing something first, we have to go back to being producers. The only
Well,
way we can
and
regulate commerce is to produce.
also they have to go back to being Indians, because it seems like everybody is everything but that. They're
Right.
Aboriginal, they're this, they're that, they're Moors, they're this, they're everything but American Indians. Especially outside of it's been a very poor job, and quite a bit of interruption for the non-recognized Indians that are still direct relatives of the people that we know to be federally recognized. And this is what they are failing to understand, especially not being able to understand the dynamics of genealogy. You can tell they don't. A lot of people are unfamiliar. You can tell how they don't take that seriously in order for you to know how to solidify yourself and whom you should unify yourself with, right? You have to align yourself with your family members, whether they are from your other clans that married into your family. If you share any of the same blood, you are able to stick together. That is your tribe, your parents, your siblings, your children, right? Your grandparents in some cases, your aunts and uncles. There's somebody in the family that delegates. There's a patriarch and there is a matriarch. There is one that is groomed, one that is waiting to be the next in line. That's something that's happened in every family.
And that is infrastructure. That is organization.
Organization, government.
Right. And to what Mr. Waltho was saying, let me see if I can catch his quote here. He was saying we have to organize so they can work with us, because and I've used this analogy before on A2's channel. You know how a lot of our people read the Old Testament and they look at the Book of Exodus, and they look at how Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, why do you ask of all these things of me, and you come here with no power? We have to build our infrastructure. I mean, there are things we can do now, like